Hi, everybody. My name is Chloe, as I've been introduced. And I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible because I'm pretty sure no one really wants to hear me talk. But what I do want to open the floor up to is after this, we can get together one-on-one, or if you guys just have questions, and really make most of the session centered around that. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. Okay, so before we get started, I want to know a little bit more about you guys and your predominant capitalization strategy. So I'm going to ask you a couple quick questions. The first one is raise your hands if you plan on funding your company through venture capital or angels. Okay, that's a good chunk of you guys in this room. We'll have to talk about that one next, Nikki. Maybe that's the next topic of conversation. Raise your hands if you plan on bootstrapping. Okay, cool, good mix. And raise your hands if you plan on taking on alternate funding like grants or debt. Okay, so a couple of you are doing multiple sources of funding, and you guys can use each other too. So do feel free to get together and talk about what experiences you're having, because that's the best way to learn, especially if you're going the venture capital route. But the one thing you all have in common, regardless of what fundraising you're is that there's going to be cash flow in and out of your company before you even get to revenue, right? Doesn't matter if you're profitable, you're still going to have money that's coming in and money that's going out. And whether it's your money on the line or someone else's, having a smart capital management strategy in the beginning is going to help you get the most out of whatever you take on, right? Any dollars that you get into your company, you want to know how to use them wisely. So now I'm wondering, how many of you have thought about getting the capital, right? I'm going to get $1 million or $50,000, but not put too much thought into where you're going to put it. No one's raising their hand, but this typically is a big one that you're like, I'm just focused on receiving the capital and I'll deal with everything after. But if you're raising your hand, if you plan to keep all your funds in a bank account, who plans to keep all their funds in a bank account? Okay, so there's a lot of you guys that are planning on doing that, even tentatively. And that's the thing that most founders do, right? Whether it's your own capital or investor money, people usually take that amount and go right into a bank account. But there's a couple things about bank accounts that are very important to know. You're insured up to $250,000 at each FDIC insured institution. So I can imagine some of you are like, oh my God, if I had $250,000, it would be the best day ever. But let's say you raised $2 million, okay? Only $250,000 of that $2 million is protected. So even though it may seem safe to keep it in a bank, you're not getting any added protection by keeping your money all in one place. In fact, you're taking on some risk, right? Because you have money that's all in one place and not insured. So pivoting a little to share some background on me, so I'm not just the rando that's up here talking to you. Before I was a financial advisor at Edward Jones, I worked at Silicon Valley Bank. I don't know if anyone's heard of that one. Yeah, kind of a big deal. I left about 5 months before the whole explosion happened, so I'm pretty sure that's why, like, the void was probably just too big, but, you know, that's okay. But really, I worked there, and I left the bank about 5 months before that crash happened. I really didn't know there were going to be future problems. If you want to, like, talk about the bank, I'm happy to. It was actually a really great organization, and I still highly recommend getting involved with them, just because there's a very strong network of resources and people. But the reason part of the reason that it was a problem was because everybody put their money in one place, right? And so what happens when all of your money is in one place and you can't access it? The most common problem isn't actually about losing those funds, but it's because the depositors were protected, right? They ended up getting funding. But that companies who had all of their cash in that one bank account couldn't access any of it until the issues were resolved. There's things like payroll that have to be paid no matter what. So if you can't access your money, where is that money gonna come from? Payroll, and so, you know, that puts you in a bad spot if you're not able to pay payroll. And that's just one example of why it's important to diversify. So diversification is largely summarized by this one statement: don't put all your eggs in one basket. I'm sure we've all heard that. And many people think of diversifying their investments as what they put their money into, but not thinking about where they actually put their money. But both how you allocate your money and where you put it are important things to consider. So there's one more example of this. I had a client that had a credit union. This is a personal example, but the credit union got hacked. So it didn't fail, but it did get hacked. And he couldn't pay his rent, right? He couldn't get his money out. And so this is one of the reasons we talked about having an additional account like Edward Jones to be able to support, which is a brokerage account, that's what it's called, but to be able to support in a time where you may not have access to your funds through a bank account. So you might be wondering, aside from my riveting tales of bank crises, what do I actually even do here, right? So I'm a financial advisor, and I help businesses that are both for-profit and nonprofit organizations, and I help them with their capital management strategy, which basically means how do you allocate your funds, how do you use your funds to effectively achieve your goals. One of the things I also talk about a lot, and you'll see it up on the slide here, is your exit strategy, right? And some of you are probably like, I'm barely getting started, I'm definitely not thinking of exiting. But we'll talk a little bit more about why that's important. I do a lot of employee benefits and education, which is a big one, especially if you're thinking of, a lot of you raise your hands for venture capital. Usually you only take on that kind of funding if you're kind of high growth, larger scale companies. And so again, this is where that employee education and being aware of what compliance goes into that and how to manage that is important. I also do insurance and pretty much that anything businesses do that involves a dollar sign. I also frequently work with individuals because at the end of the day, if you're looking to accomplish a goal, it's not that much different than starting a business, right? Buying a house, family expansion, et cetera, is really pretty closely joined with just getting your business off the ground. So because of my background in entrepreneurship, and I've worked with startups for as long as I have, I've built a really diverse network of resources and knowledge that I'm here to share. So please ask me questions, and if I don't know, I probably know somebody who does. So ask me anything, even if it seems like something I wouldn't know. Okay, so back to the topic at hand. We've started talking a little bit about different ways to position company cash. So now what can we do with it, right? Once we've figured out where to put it, what do we do with it? When you put your money in a bank account, one of the reasons this is also not that beneficial, even though part of it being it's not totally protected, but also you get no interest. So you're actually basically losing money because you're not capturing any interest. So that bank account is giving you 0.0 nothing, which is not ideal. So think about it this way. If you have $1 million sitting in a bank account, earning nothing, or $1 million earning 4%, and 4% is not a guarantee, it's just an example, but the actual rates as like end of day today are in the 3.9s, so they're pretty close. But that's about $40,000 a year of free money, okay? So let that sink in for a second. If you got $1 million in funding and you put it in an account that earns interest, over the course of a year, you could potentially make $40,000 for free. That would be the same as me walking up to you with a check for $40,000 and saying, here it is, no strings attached. No matter how much you've raised, would anyone in this room turn down an additional 40K? If you're raising your hand, we definitely need to talk out. I would rather do whatever you're doing. that makes that relevant, right? So you also may be thinking, right, $1 million is really far off. Again, we're just getting started. But even if you're bootstrapping and you have $10,000 set aside for your company, it's not going to be 40 grand a year, but it's still going to be something. And it would be a few $100s of no strings attached extra cash per year. And so the point being that no matter where you're at in your company journey, it's never too early or too late to utilize your money and the resources you have more effectively. So now you may be thinking like, okay, Chloe, you're saying a lot of things that I'd really like to have $40,000, but I know about risk and reward, right? And obviously to get more reward, I have to take on more risk. And that would be bad with corporate cash, right? Because you really need to protect principal. But even in the safest options, there's risk, right? Even a bank, and we've talked about some of the risk factors in a bank. But the point of having a strategy and a smart capital management strategy is to mitigate that risk as much as possible and take advantage of every opportunity that you have, right? And put yourself in the best position to succeed. So before we dive in more deeply, because that was a lot of information, I'm going to pause here for any questions. Does anyone have anything they want to ask? If you need to marinate on it a little more too, that's okay. Wow, I guess I did a really good job of explaining that. Okay, so I hope we've established at this point that one of the things every business owner needs, regardless of industry, size, capital strategy, et cetera, is that you need a solid plan for how you're going to manage your finances. And I want to provide reassurance that if any point today you're confused and you're like, I have no idea what Chloe's talking about, I don't even know how to get started, this is very overwhelming, that's what I'm here for, so do please ask. I'm happy to point you in the right direction. The important thing to think about, right, is at this stage in your company journey, you guys are doing so much. You're doing marketing, sales, product development, interpersonal relations, investor relations, et cetera, and doing all the leadership, right, if you're hiring employees. And you don't have to worry about doing things that are auxiliary or adjacent to your business, right? That don't serve your core purpose. I mean, really, because that's taking you away from growing your business, right? And I assume That's why most, if not all of us, are sitting here today, because we want to grow our businesses. So this is really leading to the next point, and you'll see that in the bottom half of this flyer. What do we really need to be thinking about today? The first thing is your growth strategy. So again, I know early on it can be a little bit of survival mode, but doing things without a plan doesn't make it any better, because now all you're doing is depriving yourself of a direction, right? So even a goal, one that's not accomplished, is better than no goal at all. So having a goal or a plan is very important, understanding how we get there, right? What's A, B, and C to get us to that point. So don't go too far down the rabbit hole thinking about this, but think a little bit about, who do you want on your team? As you're building your company, who are you going to hire? Who's your first hire? Who's your 15th hire, right? How do you grow and scale your company? How many people are you going to need, right? Do you need 20 people? Do you need an in-house engineer? Could you outsource? Things like that. How much can you actually afford to pay them, right, without compromising your bottom line? What incentives and morale boosters can you provide, et cetera, et cetera. So thinking about what tools you need in place to serve the people that serve your purpose is going to be one of the most important things you do at this stage. How are you helping the people that are part of your organization building their futures while they help you build yours, right? I'll tell you that one time I talked to a startup and I brought up some things that larger companies do, right, like 401ks. And they were like, oh, no, we can't possibly do that because we don't want to appear large and established. We're trying to be a startup. And I was like, you guys, your office is like 7 beanbags and a whiteboard. No one's going to doubt that. You're definitely a startup. So having a plan and being prepared at any stage is going to be the most important element of being successful. But it's also important to think about your exit strategy pretty early on. Again, it's early in your journey. I know that seems really far off, but how you scale your company really needs to be with that exit in mind, because that's going to help you inform what we do now and 3 years from now and 5 years from now, et cetera. So for people that are taking on funding from investors, this is thinking about, how much equity do you give away? What's your valuation? How many people are you going to hire? How do you choose to run your company? So really, we want to be thinking about, where do we want to end up? Are we trying to get acquired? Are we trying to IPO? Are we wanting to just have a good business for ourselves to live on and to make income? Does that income need to end in retirement? Does it need to keep going through retirement, right? What does that look like? So your company's future is pretty closely aligned with your future right now, right? So just take 30 seconds to visualize a little bit. When someone asks you what your future looks like, and you guys can jot this down if you're taking notes, but just brainstorm it just for a second. Is this company going to be your retirement? Is it a business for your family? Do you step away from it at some point? What do you want to really get out of all the blood, sweat, and tears you're putting into this endeavor right now? This company is a part of your life. So keep that in mind as you go through this process. There's a million other things you could be doing that would probably be a heck of a lot easier. So why this, right? What is your why? So this presentation really could go on for a super long time, right? Because of how important all of this stuff is. But I hope what you get out of today is that you have resources and you're not alone to accomplish these things, right? You have me, you have the SBDC, you have your network. There's a lot of business owners in this room that are going to be going through the same things as you are, right? So talk to each other. If they learn something along their journey that they can help you avoid it. There's no reason to go through that by yourself, right? And so if you look up at the screen, just so you guys know, I mean, I mentioned a little bit of what I do, but really those are all of the ways that I can help on that right side. So again, really think about what this means to you, because we're not just here to be here. So if anything struck a chord with you today, just get in touch with me, and I've left my calendar open a bit so we can get you guys all on the calendar if you want to. But really, financial is so much more about strategy and overall plan than just finances in a nutshell. So that's really all I got for you guys. I'm happy to take any questions, and then we can open it up. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Really great
absolutely.
information. I was wondering if I could ask about the different options for how to diversify, your funds into different maybe bank accounts, maybe brokerage accounts, maybe other options. So if it were kind of on the small end of funds, maybe up to that 250,000 or, below that, how would you diversify your funds if you would?
Yeah, so also everyone just keep in mind, we can sit down one-on-one and then we can talk about your individual situation, but I actually can't make any recommendations from this perspective. So none of this is a recommendation, but these are suggestions. So there's a couple different ways. The first is obviously having multiple different accounts, right? If you have multi-million dollars, using a couple different banks can be a good way to increase that coverage a little bit. But FDIC coverage is not the only type of coverage. There's something called SIPC in coverage too, which protects customers in case of broker-dealer insolvency, which is like if Edward Jones went down, which it's been like hundreds of years and they have a bajillion dollars in real estate. So not super worried about that, but there's SIPC and FDIC. And then there's something called brokered CDs, and brokered CDs actually are purchased. So like your bank is not going to offer you, like Capital One's not going to offer you a Chase CD. But when you come to a brokerage firm, they can look through Chase and Ally and First Republic and all those banks, right? So using brokered CDs helps you get that coverage at each institution. Sometimes the CD rates are a little lower than other options in the market, so it just depends on how the individual company needs to structure it. But there's ways to like utilize that interest even more than just making it, right? Once we get to that point, once we have enough money that we're making some interest on it, and again, enough is very minimal. It's like $250 is like the minimal investment for a money market. But that's really kind of how to think about it, is what tools are out there that I don't have to be running around to 15 different banks to keep track of my money. One of the things that's going to be important to define early on, if you do plan to use money to make interest or invest or et cetera, is going to be having that conversation with investors to an extent, right? As like, okay, this is how your money's protected. This is our growth strategy. We're going to use interest to pay you back. We're going to use interest to do this. Whatever we're going to do. But all that stuff you want to lay out because you don't want to surprise your investors and be like, ha, I'm taking your money and investing it. And they're going to be like, what the heck? So that's probably the start. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, sort of. Could you get a little, like, I'm not really familiar with like the different options. So like, sure. I kind of know what a bank is. You give them money and they hold it for you.
Right.
Say like Edward Jones, I guess is a different financial institution, which might be different from you were talking about for CDs or something like that. Can you kind of break down the different institutions a bit more?
Absolutely. So banks are banks, right? Chase, Wells Fargo, et cetera. CDs come from banks. They're basically an agreement from the bank. So it's like, okay, if you give me your money for 3 months, I'm going to return it back to you with interest. Depending on what your use case is and how long that money can sit, that's a very important thing to consider when you consider whether or not you're going to use a CD. Because if you need that money a month and a half in, it's not just like, okay, let's pull it out. They're like, you promised there's going to be fees, because everyone always needs their cut. So that's really how CDs work. And then there's brokerage firms, which are like, I don't know if you've seen Merrill Lynch that's down the street, Charles Schwab, Edward Jones. We're all kind of in the same sphere of actually managing investments and selling securities and different types of offerings that we have. So CDs are an investment tool. And if you come from your bank, they're going to offer you their CDs. If you come from a brokerage firm, they'll have CDs that they have access to. There's a marketplace essentially where we can browse CDs from all different institutions, like all over the country.
Gotcha. Okay. And say like Edward Jones also has an option to open an account with them, not just for CDs.
Yep.
Okay.
And I mean, there's a bunch of different types of financial advisory firms. Some are going to have different limits. And you're going to want to find an advisor that you really like and trust, because it's a pretty close relationship, right? This is someone that you're going to have to get on the phone with. So if you're dreading each other's phone calls, it's going to be a real bad time. So, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so as like a person myself, I can go into the market, I can buy different investment vehicles, say a ETF, or I can put all my money in Apple stock. Is the same true in a company? Can we just hold all of our money in Apple stock and then liquidate it?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, by all means. So it depends what you're using, right? Like there's a couple like Robinhood and Acorns. You have to have a platform. Someone somewhere has to be buying the investments, because You have to go to special school and get a whole bunch of licenses to be able to trade securities. So that's where some of those platforms come in, is they help consumers have more access to it. It's the same. Basically, you just instruct us what you want us to do, and then we execute pretty much, and that's what.
And then what are the most popular investment vehicles that companies use outside of like banks and CDs?
Yeah, so again, there is a level of risk that you can afford. That's a great question. There's a level of risk that you can afford to take on. It really depends. Like, I can tell you right now, Apple does not have all of their money in a bank account or a money market or a CD, right? They have a very sophisticated approach to investing at this point because of how much money they make. And so these are things you can actually look up on the internet, like how do different large organizations invest their funds. But it depends what stage your company's at, and it will grow and change. So like, there's one nonprofit that I work with. Obviously, they can't take very much risk with the principal investment, right? So let's say that was 10K. They can't take any risk with that 10K. But one of the things that they can do is put it into a CD where it's FDIC insured, which is making interest. And since that interest, and it's in their corporate investment policy, which is a big thing that's going to be important to write out if you're investing funds, but that interest is free money to them. And so that's one of the things that they've invested into several different types of investments, right? Mutual funds, ETFs, things like that. So it really, I wouldn't say there's anything that's like strictly off limits. There's some things that we have to use for specifically like nonprofits and certain companies like that to be more conservative, but it just depends on what the needs are of the company at the time.
Okay, so to clarify, there's really no difference between like a corporation and a person when it comes to investing. And then as a corporation, you'd be considered, I forget the term, but like an institutional investor. So you could even invest in other startups if you wanted to.
So a lot of the different investor accreditations are based on like liquid net worth and what that money can be used for. So possibly, like, again, there's a lot of overlap. So yes, there are differences, but there's not differences at the same time. Like, it's a lot. There's two types of money markets. There's one that's invested in some alternate instruments, and then there's one that's mostly focused on treasury. We can't use that first one for nonprofits. So we have to use the treasury-focused one because there's a higher degree of security. So there are some differences, but it's nuanced, and for each person, it's going to be let's sit down, let's go through everything. Let's see where you're at and what you need this money for, and then figure it out from there. Does that answer that?
Yeah, no, it does.
Awesome.
Thank you, and thank you for supporting the programs that you have here. They're very vital and really help us get together and strategize. And it's nice to have it local and also the consultants local. But this one came unlocal, and I'm curious if you could let me know what CalSavers is and how that might impact us. We just keep getting emails from them, and I don't know if you could comment on that or if it's something we should, what is the evaluation in a private brokerage firm versus working with something like CalSavers? And I don't know what it is, so I can't explain my question any further.
You were spot on. That was actually next. I was going to take some questions, but like, this is my favorite and least favorite topic all at the same time. I'm hoping in January I can stop talking about this because I've literally been running around like a crazy person since last January, like being like, please pay attention. So there's a new act coming down the pipe called the Secure 2.0 Act. And it's mandated by California only. It's not a nationwide regulation. There are other states that are starting to jump on board, so do be aware where you're expanding into and what their regulations are. But the Secure 2.0 Act really says this: for every business with more than one employee, by the end of this year, December 31st, they will have to offer some sort of retirement plan. That is the act. So several years ago, it was 50 or more employees and you could be exempt if you had under 50. And then it was 10 or more employees and you could be exempt if you had under 10. And now it is 1 or more. And it does not discriminate by the type of business. It does not matter if you're part-time or full-time. If you have people on your payroll, you need to offer this plan. So that's really the regulation in a nutshell. The CalSavers specifically is the California version of the retirement. So this is the state one that's offered. It's technically free, and I say technically because the cost is to you and your time, right? So even though there's not a financial output, you have to do all the administrative stuff. Again, for one employee, maybe not the biggest deal. For 20 employees, for 50 employees, it could be. People can opt out of contributing to the retirement plan. Not everybody has to contribute. So it's an important thing to think about. Number one is, who do you want to contribute? Who does this need to be available for? And number two, what is the benefit of the program that you're offering them, right? Is it worth doing a lot of extra work if just no one's gonna use it? And number three, how are you using it most effectively? So I think, and this is where I have really mixed feelings, right? On the one hand, for businesses, I feel for them, right? This is just another frickin' thing in this state. Like, this is no fun that there's another regulation and something we have to do. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people that will never retire because these options aren't available to them. So think about even in this area, right? So much of our workforce is hospitality, hotels, wineries, restaurants. These are traditionally industries that don't offer retirement plans. And so making it available is a very important piece of this puzzle, I think, on the individual side. There's a very specific reason I say make it available because, again, it doesn't have to be available to everyone and it doesn't have to be executed. 401ks can be sometimes more useful than CalSavers for a couple reasons. Number one, you can actually have exclusions, right? This person has to work more than a year and they have to work 60 hours a week. That's like not real, but you know what I mean. You can set conditions unlike some other plans. And you can also actually, in some cases, use tax credits to offset the cost of offering that plan. So it might not even be that expensive to offer it. And then it begs a lot of other questions, like, do I need to do a match? How many employees am I gonna have, right? Because if you're not gonna have more than 10 employees, there's some other plans that could be a better fit. There's a couple other things you'll hear thrown around. Safe harbor 401k, that usually refers to very highly compensated individuals. So if you have a company that has several individuals that make over $100,000 a year, that's when you start getting into some of that. Nonprofits used to have some individual ones like 403bs and 457s, and they are still offered. They're getting a little bit less popular because they're a little more expensive to administer and there's more restrictions on the investment options. It really just depends on understanding the structure of the 401k. So really, the biggest thing to know is there's a lot more options to retirement plans. CalSavers is pretty much a glorified Roth IRA. That's the state-run Roth IRA, and there's limited investment options, which I think is why a lot of people don't end up contributing when employers offer CalSavers, is because they're like, why would I even do this? There's no match, it's not super great, like I could just do it on my own and it would be fine. And so again, thinking about who are you hiring, what are they doing, and especially early on, I think one of the things businesses miss is how to use this as a tool, right? Because let's say you might not be able to offer the most competitive salary, but you can give them a 401k with a 3% match. That's a more attractive offer, potentially, for a candidate. So if you really want good talent, it can also be an employee like acquisition and retention tool. And so that's something to think about as well. So that was a lot of information. Happy to unpack more of it, but that's the gist of the Secure 2.0 Act. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand what availability means, because you mentioned that one, it doesn't have to be available to everyone. Does that mean, like, if you're already getting a 401k, you don't have to make CalSavers available? Like, if you have one employee, it has to be available to them, or that would kind of defeat the purpose, right?
So it depends how you structure it. Like yes, you have to have one retirement plan available at least that's satisfying the requirement. Not everybody has to contribute. So it has to be available, but not everybody has to contribute. So you can opt out, you can just choose not to. Your employees can choose not to contribute, but you have to offer it as the employer.
And then, so I'm not technically on payroll, but I believe if I sued my own company, I would be considered an employee by the state of California. Does that mean that I have to offer, as both a shareholder and technically an employee, I have to offer it to myself as
Yes.
a
So it's one employee outside of the owner. So you don't have to offer it if it's just to you or just you and another owner, but if it's another employee, you do.
Okay.
So that's where you'd want to make sure that you do that. So there was something else I was going to say, but it'll come to me at some point, I'm sure.
So just to clarify, if everyone's a part owner and you have 4 people, then you would not technically need to.
It depends how it's structured. So this is where it really gets into the nuances of what it is. Oh, this is what I was going to say. So startups love to do this. They love to say, yeah, this person's a 1099 and they're doing W-2 work. They're cracking down on that too. So you really want to make sure that your employees are designated correctly, that they're being paid correctly, and that's going to determine a lot about this, right? Is how they're compensated and all of that. So we can go through it individually, because again, there's some exemptions for certain industries, right? Like some religious institutions and nonprofits are able to be exempt. So things like that are important to consider as well. So we just want to be thinking about what your specific structure is and how that applies to you. And again, it might be something like if you want a co-founder and you have 4 part owners, maybe this is an additional way that you compensate them, right? So that you can pay with the business a little bit. And as an owner, there's one more thing to think about. This is not the requirement, but this is something to consider, is your own retirement strategy, right? We talk about your business as a part of your retirement strategy, but thinking about what is my actual strategy, because I can't put all my eggs into this business, right? A lot of times people are starting a company, but they still have bills, they still have families, they still are gonna want kids, right? And yes, you're retired. I hope everyone's business makes it to the level that they want it to make it to be successful in retirement. But if for some reason that's not enough, you don't want to have missed all the years of funding your own retirement. So there's plans for business owners like SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, owner-only 401ks, et cetera, that you may want to look into regardless, just because they're a good vehicle for you to be able to better support yourself.
We have a question online from Shay. I had read that using a 401k to fund your business is an option worth considering. What are the pros and cons?
That's a loaded one. Really depends. Again, it really depends on your individual financial situation and how you're structuring your own life and how you're paying your bills and what your goals of your money are, right? Like I will say in like my personal example, we have some rental properties. I had some like little retirement accounts from like random jobs that I worked that were very little, like they were like a year of contributing, so it was not a lot. And I was like, okay, does it make sense for me to pull a year of retirement out of some of my little accounts to fund my future? Yes, absolutely, right? I will make that back and then some. But again, it really depends on your personal financial situation and how you're managing your own finances and what your goals are in your life. And how this business is going to function, right? This is why, again, it's so important to be thinking about, why am I doing this? Of all the things I could be doing, why this? And what do I want it to look like as I grow in my life? How is this business going to grow with me, or how am I going to step back from it and away from it?
And I'm not sure what everyone's level here is in familiarity with retirement plans, but would you mind just providing a brief overview of like Roth versus non-Roth, just compounding interest?
Yeah, totally. So usually I draw pictures. I don't know, do we have a whiteboard?
There's a whiteboard right behind
Great. Oh, it's right behind me. I should like pay attention to my surroundings. I found the marker. Yeah, situational awareness, not my strong suit as a human. This magically got drawn by the elves. This is not compliance approved material, but I will just show you. Okay, so this is tax-free money. This is taxed money. A traditional IRA, right, or anything that has a traditional in front of it is just referring to the tax treatment. So traditional, the money goes in, not taxed, grows and grows and grows, comes out taxed. And a Roth is exactly the opposite. So the money goes in taxed, grows and grows and grows, comes out tax-free. And so that is fundamentally it. When you hear all these fancy words, and you can invest in both the same investments in both of these. This is really just related to the tax treatment. Why you would use one over the other, again, very much depends on your personal situation. Investments depending on your portfolio objective and how conservative you are or aggressive you are, that's going to affect your rate of return. It depends what type of investments you're in, and again, most of all, why are you using this money? So that's where it's a little bit individual, but really traditional and Roth just refers to a tax treatment. And if you need help figuring that out, then you have to talk to your CPA, because I'm not a tax person.
Okay, never mind, sorry.
That's okay.
I know the tax question.
Yeah, tax questions, hard no. But we can work with your CPA together and figure lots of cool things out.
And I was wondering, are these available to the company itself? Can a company itself hold a 401k that it invests into, or even a Roth IRA, or are these just for individual people?
So they're for the people in the organization, but like the retirement account can be in the employer name. So like, I don't know, you'd have Joe Schmo's 401k plan, and it would be offered to everybody. So that's kind of how that works. But like, you couldn't, and I don't know that it would even make sense to have a business contributing to a 401k, because it's really for retirement focused. Like, that's what the whole point of this is like, how do you retire? So this means you're taking like, be happy now, angry later, angry now, happy later. That's the plan. So
There's also community investing programs, and do brokers ever work with community investing programs, or is it something that one has to research where, like we had one called Heart Group or Heart Investing here in San Luis Obispo, and then they would reinvest in local business, startups and things like that. So do you ever interact with that? Because the idea of a broker kind of, winking an eye and going, yes, this is a good thing for your overall plan or not. I just wondered if there's any collaboration when you're in that type of a program.
yeah, totally. So I think I'm understanding. So if I'm not correct, just tell me what you want me to say. But basically, every broker dealer is going to be a little bit different, right? And how the employees function in the company is going to be a little different. So like, I don't really know how Charles Schwab or Merrill Lynch does it. I assume the brokers have their interests, but like Edward Jones gives us a lot of freedom to do the things we're passionate about and to go be involved in the community that way. That's why I can get involved here. I can only give advice, financial advice, as Edward Jones. So like, I am not an SBDC financial advisor. I am Chloe Feingold at Edward Jones volunteering at the SBDC. So that's the really important distinction, is it has to be within the firm. Because of my background in entrepreneurship, I've always kind of run in those circles. So like, yes, are there VCs I know personally? For sure. Are there angel investors I know personally? For sure. I have passed people to them. I'm a pretty hard screen, right? Because like, if I pass someone on, that's my reputation that I'm putting on the line. So I have done that before, just like, hey, this might be a good connection for you, and then they take it from there. But as far as like being affiliated with any groups, I don't think so. If there was a group that wanted to like have me come, like my mom was in some random club with her friends that they like randomly invested in stocks together. I don't really know, but I was like that, I could go talk to them, I guess, and help them, but I'm not like affiliated with the club, if that makes sense.
So assuming that I have a business and I have never had a business before, this is my first time, how would I go about, let's say I have one employee and I'm like, okay, this new Secure 2.0 Act is coming through. Are there websites, like I'm hearing some things about CalSavers, some things about 401k, like do you just Google it and then you can create an option to have that retirement account? I guess like, what are the tangible steps that someone would need to take?
Great question. So this is always like a funny thing to me, because I'm actually from the Bay Area initially. I've been here for several years now, but that was like, my background was in Bay Area tech and entrepreneurship. And so coming down here, it was really funny, because the Bay Area, you walk out your door, you're like, I'm starting a business. And everyone's like, how can I help you? And then out here, you walk out your door and you're like, I'm starting a business. And it's like, good luck. Like, let's see what you find out. And it's like, that's why I'm so thankful for organizations like this, because they really do consolidate a lot of those resources. There's several different ways you can get access to a 401k plan. Honestly, I always say, business owners, your job is to do your business, right? To do the thing that is going to make you money and make you successful. Your only other job is to use your gut, to find someone you trust and let them guide you, right? And if you don't trust that professional enough to guide you, time to get a new one. Like, that is not someone you stay with, right? But the first step is talking to your financial advisor. I mean, we do a lot of these plans. This is a big focus for us, is setting up these 401ks, doing the employee education, because there's some people who have had 401ks through their companies for many years and have never heard from the financial advisor or anyone affiliated with that plan. Technically, employee education is supposed to be involved, because it is an expense, and you want people to understand why they should contribute to it and then contribute to it, right? You don't want to pay for it and no one uses it. It's like, that's kind of a waste. So first step would be find someone you trust. Second step would be talk to them. I think some people love the internet. I think some people do not. I personally find it really overwhelming, but I do sometimes get the person in my office that's like, so TikTok told me, and I'm like, oh, what did TikTok tell you? And then we go through that. So there's a lot of information, and consequently, there's a lot of misinformation. It can be really confusing. So regarding regulations, again, just like I didn't catch your name, but you mentioned there's letters coming across your desk. You will get those. If you are eligible, you will get those. So pay attention to those things. Don't just put them in the shredder. Please open those. Secondly is, again, finding that person you trust, and you're welcome to do some research. It depends what stage your company's at, how you're going to use the tax credits, what the best way to offset it is, because like there's some payroll providers that offer, I think it's Gusto offers Guideline, which is like their 401k, and it's like it has a pretty low base fee, but has a really high per participant charge. So if you're a small company, it might work for you, and if it gets really large, you're going to pay a lot more with that than you would with other ones, and they're structured a little different. So payroll providers sometimes offer some. Obviously, we can always construct one. We work with like a bunch of different, Empower's one we work with, John Hancock, right? We work with a bunch of these different, ADP, et cetera, to put these plans together. So if someone you want to talk to is really the bottom line. Yeah. Such good questions.
Are some of these retirement plans able to have social investing guidelines in them?
Like for the ESG investor?
Environmental policies and climate and basically social indicators that the retirement plan invests in or stores the money in or is available for investment?
Yeah, great question. So this depends. This is part of the reason it's so important to figure out who you want to work with, right? Because some 401k plans are going to be like, here's your 401k plan. You're like, great, can I make any changes? They're like, here's your 401k plan. You're like, okay, not super helpful, but whatever. Versus if you're working with like a financial advisor, so more non-approved pictures, so just ignore this. Okay, there's 3 roles, ignore this stuff underneath it. There's your FA, there's your TPA, and there's your record keeper. Okay, so your record keeper is like ADP. That's the person that actually holds the 401k. Your TPA is what's called a third-party administrator, and that's a necessity for a 401k, even an owner-only 401k. And then you have a financial advisor. Your financial advisor can make, if I'm your financial advisor on your plan, I get to select the investments that go into that. So yes and no, it depends obviously how much is in the plan, what type of flexibility we have with the investments, how we can contribute, and who we're working with for these two. But yes, technically. So, and for anyone who doesn't know what that question was, ESG is like what the coding we use for a type of investor pretty much. It's environmental social governance. It's people who are more focused on certain things. So like, honestly, in my heart of hearts, and this is not like a recommendation by any means, this is just my personal, tobacco is not really one that I typically like to invest in. So I try to avoid that, but also like, depending on where I'm at, there's only so much I can do, right? So not because it's a bad investment per se, just because that's a personal thing. But like those beliefs and opinions are what informs that kind of investment. So yes and no. And in your personal life too, there's a bunch of ways around that. There's some things that are coming out with like SMAs, which are referred to as separately managed accounts, which is a whole separate thing where you have a little more flexibility over what you put money into and stuff like that.
All right. For any, let's say, early stage startups or early businesses, are there any mistakes or things that you commonly see people run into that you would say would be like something to watch out for?
Ooh, that's a big one, Nikki. That is a good question. So, okay. On the financial side, there's some, and then there's like random ones that I'll just give you from my, again, riveting tales of bank crises and startup failures. So on the financial side, again, it's not thinking about this stuff early enough. You would be shocked how many people just like meander through their company journey, and then they either get to be a big company and they're like, I have no idea how I got here, and nothing works how it's supposed to, and now I have to rescale everything, right? It's a lot harder to do that when you have 20 people that are in full go mode than when you're sitting here trying to figure out how to enable those 20 people to be in full go mode, right? So thinking about your exit strategy, your growth strategy, why this even matters to you, why you're doing this. I mention those things because no one thinks about them, and they are so important. The amount of, like, I just had someone come in the other day. We were talking about the exit plan for the business. They never thought about why they were exiting the business or where that money was going to go or how they were going to use it or what that meant for them or what they were even going to do after they didn't have this business taking up 97.8% of their time all the time, right? So these are the things to think about on a personal note. And again, getting this strategy nailed down, having these conversations with investors, understanding where your capital is coming from, why you're taking on these sources of capital, et cetera, which leads me to the next point of be careful of the type of capital you take on, right? I think venture capital is real sexy. People love the sound of that. They're like, I'm going to take on millions of dollars of someone else's money. And that sounds really fun, but there's a lot that comes with that, right? Of having stakeholders and people that you have to report to and people that are like over your shoulder. And you have to be aware of, number one, the type of partnerships you have with those people. Number two, what taking on that funding means for your company business. And number three is thinking about how that's going to function, right? Is it worth it? Is it worth taking on that funding at this point? Because taking on the wrong type of funding too early can cripple you. So that's a big one. Thinking about who you have on your team is incredibly important, right? Like there are several companies I know that were like, oh, this person's so great. They have all this experience. And that person came on, took 2% equity and did nothing. And they had no way of taking that equity back. They had no way of dealing with that person. Like they were just there. They got that equity. And then this is why a vesting schedule and things like this are important, which is what you talk to like a cap table lawyer about, which I also have. I have several startup lawyers if anyone needs one. That will be helpful in this case that I work with pretty regularly. So that is a long-winded way of saying finances are like the number one crippling thing, right? A business is in business to make a profit. If you're not making a profit, that's a big problem. So everything that relates to that bottom line is going to be essential to think about. Does that answer the question? The side of the room is very quiet. Except right on that midline.
Are there anything that you see coming down the pipeline of financial planning or business in general that we should be looking out for that might, throw 2026 for a loop?
Get this retirement plan thing in order because the fines are no fun. Like the fines are going to be way worse than just doing it in the first place. This is without a doubt the biggest thing. Like every business owner I meet, I'm just like, hi, I don't even tell them my name. Here's what you need to know about the SCARE 2.0 Act. Bye. Like that's literally how my life has been. So that is going to be a big one. Regulations are always changing, specifically on taxes. So working closely with a good CPA is going to be really important. And maybe that's one of the things I should clarify. So there's lots of different types of tax people. The reason CPAs are CPAs is because they can do public auditing. That's why they have their job. There's another type of tax person called an enrolled agent, right? That has the same things as a CPA, just can't do the auditing piece. And so finding a tax person right now is like, if anyone has great ones, I'm actually open to suggestions because one time I called one and I was like, can I send you a client? And they were like, if you send me a client, I'll never speak to you again. And I was like, noted, cool, that's super helpful. So really hard, okay? Really hard environment for CPAs particularly. So that is something to get a relationship with. ASAP, taxes are never going away. They're always going to be there. You want to be effective, right? So thinking about talking to a CPA or someone that does accounting, and Nikki and I had this conversation. I was like, you can bring in an accounting professional because I can't do that. And I just met one the other day that I'm actually vetting that does a lot of startups. Also exotic animals, weirdly enough. So, that was an interesting conversation. So working on that. The other thing is a lot of EAs will also do bookkeeping. Finding a bookkeeper can be very helpful. Not everybody loves QuickBooks. Not everybody has good time for QuickBooks, which makes QuickBooks really, really painful. So please find someone who can do your bookkeeping. That is the number one thing. And most of the reason a lot of tax preparers don't work with businesses is because of how bad their books are, and they don't want to deal with that headache. So get your books in order. Get your finances in order is like I cannot say it enough, is be thinking about all of these things. And yeah, good relationships are going to be the key. Like finding that person that you're going to work with that's a financial advisor, tax person, lawyers, et cetera. Having those in your pocket so you can scale without having to like figure that out in the middle of things is going to be really helpful.